Bhagavad Gita. First of all, I'm just going to say some introductory prayers. Migna Purandasha, Namdina Shraddha, Rakshu Marita, Migna, Vedmoshi, Urubri, Urubu Vishnu, Urubu Vinera, Chincha, Samasade, Govanda Vidam, Randa Vishnu, I guess everybody here is sort of heard of the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe you're not all familiar with it. This book called Bhagavad Gita was spoken over 5,000 years ago by Lord Krishna to his dear friend Arjuna. So it says in the glories of the Bhagavad Gita, so this Bhagavad Gita, the supreme scripture, bestows all good on those who hear it, regularly chant it, with some devotion. So it's a bestowal of all good. It's the new life for the dying. It's activation for the lazy. It's like medicine. It's like medicine for us. This is a transcendental sound vibration that has a definite effect on the consciousness. It doesn't affect the body. It's not medicine for the body. It's medicine for the consciousness. So, the Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses. 700 verses of instruction spoken to Arjuna for the benefit of all of humankind. For the benefit of everybody. Even as animals hear about the Bhagavad Gita, they hear the Bhagavad Gita, they get some benefit, everybody does. Everybody that hears this vibration, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is the same. Everybody who hears it, there's some benefit there for everyone. So this is a book of 700 verses of instruction, and the verse that I'm going to read is the very first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna. And this is in chapter 2, and it is verse 11. Verse 9. So verse 11, chapter 2, and chapter 2 is called the contents of the Gita summarized. This is Srila Prabhupada saying the whole Gita in this chapter. This chapter is incredibly important because basically it's the constitution of the soul. It talks about how the soul and the body operate in this material world. So this verse number 11 is Sri Bhagavan Vacha Socham Sochastvam Sajam Vidam Chava Shishi Yatasam Agatasam Chava Nano Sochanti Pandala. That's the Sanskrit. This is actually spoken in the Sanskrit language. And the English translation is, the Blessed Lord said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. So I'll just read that again. The Blessed Lord said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. And Srila Prabhupada has got a commentary on this verse. The Lord at once took the position of a teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly fool. The Lord said, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament at any stage of the body, even the living or the dead condition. As it will be explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the control of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance in politics and sociology, but he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the supreme is even more important than religious formalities. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have opposed himself as a very learned man, as he did not happen to be a very learned man. He was consequently lamenting for something which is unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be banished, either today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned. For him, there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. So, Arjuna and Krishna, their relationship is one of friendship, like best friends. But when Arjuna becomes completely bewildered, because this is a fratricidal war, which means it's a war fought between family members. So Arjuna and Krishna, they were very good friends. So Krishna became Arjuna's chariot rider and said, I'm not going to fight in this war, but I will be your chariot rider. And so Arjuna says to Krishna, see this instruction, this is the very first instruction. It comes in the second chapter, beginning of the second chapter. So the first chapter is dedicated to the introduction of who are all these warriors on the opposing side. Because this was spoken in the middle of the battlefield, about these big battles about to commence. There were 6 million soldiers, 6 million warriors there. So it wasn't a small thing. It was this huge big war that was about to take place. There's 6 million people on this battlefield. And Arjuna asked Krishna, please draw my chariot in front of the opposing army so I can see who I must contend with on this battlefield. Who am I going to have to fight? Who are they? So Krishna pulls his chariot up there, and this beautiful chariot with white horses, 6 white horses, and a staff with a flag of Hanuman on the staff. And Hanuman's really there. He's not just a flag with Hanuman, he's really there. And a few times he actually come off the staff to engage in the war. So he was there personally, and in a very fierce posture. So Krishna pulls the chariot in front of all the armies there. There's huge big armies. There's many paintings of this depicted. This place is called Kurkshetra in India, just north of Delhi. You can go there today. There are many temples, and it's all dedicated to the battle that took place there. So Krishna pulls the chariot in front of everybody, and Arjuna's there, and he says, "Oh my God, there's my martial teacher, Dronacharya. He's worthy of my worship, like my guru. Grandfather Bhishma, who was so affectionate to us when we were children, growing up in the court of King Dhritarashtra. Because the Pandavas, there's 5 of them, and what happened was that their father, Pandu, was actually the king, because Dhritarashtra was the eldest son, so he was qualified to be the king, except he had one disqualification. He was born blind, so that disqualified him from being the king. So Pandu was the next eldest, so he became the emperor. He's not actually king, they were emperors of the whole planet, and many subordinate kings would pay homage to them. And they would keep everything under control and make sure that everybody was, because the Varnashram Dham was actually operating at that time. Varnashram Dham is a socio-religious formation of society where everybody's in their natural position. So society moves very smoothly. Arjuna is thinking, I'm going to have to fight with not only grandfather Bhishma and Dronacharya, like his guru Kripacharya and Ashvatthama, Dronacharya's son, and his friend Bharshrava was like his best friend, and they're all on the other side at the fight. And Dhritarashtra's 100 sons led by Duryodhana. Because there was enmity amongst them all the time, because Pandu was the king and he had two queens, Madri and Kunti. But his nature was one of a renunciate. He loved to be around the Brahmins and the sacrifices and the chanting of mantras and all those things and the deity worship, and he just loved all that. So he said at one stage, I'm giving up the kingdom, I'm going to the forest. And he took his queens and he went to the forest. So Dhritarashtra became the king, even though he was blind and not really qualified to be the king. But Vidura was the next, so there's three of them. There was Dhritarashtra, he was blind. There was Pandu, he was the king, but he left to go to the forest, so Dhritarashtra became the king. And Vidura was the next one, but he wasn't qualified to be the emperor either, because of his birth. He was born to a maidservant, so that disqualified him. But he was an incarnation of Yamaraj, and he was incredibly intelligent. So he was the king of the emperor's advisor. So he gave advice to the emperor, very good advice. And so, Arjuna was thinking, we've got to fight all these. And so when Pandu went to the forest with his two queens, he happened to be cursed that he couldn't beget children and his wives. So Kunti said to him, his queen Kunti said to him, well, I have a boon. I've been given a boon by Divasa Muni, who was a great mystic, and he was very pleased with her service to him when he went to visit the palace where she was. She was Vasudev's sister, right? Was it Vasudev's sister? Yeah, she's Krishna's auntie. Vasudev's sister, or Devaki's sister, one of them. She said, I have this boon that I can call any of the demigods and beget a child with them. Pandit said, fantastic, that's great. Call Yamaraj. So she called Yamaraj, and Yudhisthira was begot, come out of that union. So Yudhisthira's father was Yamaraj, Dharmaraj. And so he was the eldest of these 5 brothers. Then Bhima, and his father was Vayu, the wind god. And Yamaraj is the lord of death. And so Bhima's father was Vayu. And then Arjuna was born, and his father was Indra, the king of the demigods. And then, then she said, that's it. I'm not calling any more. I don't want to overdo it. And Pandu kept on saying, okay, he said, okay. But then Madri said, well, Kunti has 3 children, I have none. And so Kunti said, okay, well, you can use this mantra once only and call in a demigod. Madri was very clever. So she called the Ashwini Kumara twins, to the gods of medicine. And she begot twins to them. So she ended up having 2 children, Nakula and Sahadev. So there was 5 of them. There was Yudhisthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula and Sahadev were the twins. But then what happened, unfortunately, Pandu, because of that curse, he died. So he passed away, he left his body, and they said, and they were living in the Himalayas with all the sages and the ashrams and perfect, and those boys were all growing up there. And they were all amazing children growing up, incredible. See, Bhima was like, he had the strength of 1,000 drunken elephants. He was strong. And at one stage, when he was just a baby, Conti had him outside, and he rolled sort of down the hill somehow, and that rolled off the edge, and he'd landed on this rock, but the rock had just split into 1,000 pieces, and I thought, wow, this boy is really special, he's super strong. And they call him the performer of Herculean tasks, ferocious eater, Bhima. And so the sages said, well, Pandu has left, these boys should go back, and I'm getting ahead of myself. Madri said, and Kunti, because in those days there's a thing called sati, where the queen would go on the funeral pyre with the husband voluntarily, and leave with the husband and go to the same destination as the husband was going. But because of the boys, these 5 boys, they decided, okay, well, Queen Kunti will stay and look after the boys. They were all very young, and Madri will ascend the funeral pyre. And that's what happened. And then so they took the boys to Hastinapur, to the capital of the Pandu, of the Kauravas actually, because Dhritarashtra was the emperor then. So they were taken there, and they grew up there amongst Dhritarashtra's 100 sons, grandfather Bhishma, all these great warriors and great personalities, and they were their favourites. The Pandavas, the 5 Pandavas, because their father's name was Pandu. The 5 Pandavas, they were loved by everybody, and they were the favourites. But there was always a rivalry between the sons of Dhritarashtra and headed by Duryodhana and Dushyasana, those 2. And there was always rivalry, and there was always competition. There was always ill feelings going on. So they grew up like that, and many times they tried to even kill, especially Bhima, because they couldn't defeat Bhima. He was very powerful. They tried many times to do nasty things to them. So there was always an enmity there, and then eventually they were banished to the forest because of a gambling match. And Yudhisthira, because Yudhisthira was the rightful heir to the kingdom, but they're not giving to him. Dhritarashtra was attached to being the emperor, but Duryodhana was really the emperor. He was doing everything that Dhritarashtra was going to forget him. So they grew up like that, and there was much enmity. And then they were banished to the forest for 12 years, and the last year they had to spend incognito. They were in the forest for 11 years. Many things happened. This is all coming from Mahabharata. Maybe I've read it many times probably, but this is all coming from Mahabharata. Then, so they spent their 11 years, then they spent 1 more year in exile, where if they were found in that last year, then they'd have to go back to the forest for another 12 years. So they went to King Draupada's kingdom, and they stayed there incognito in different ways. Yudhisthira as the king's advisor, Bhima as the cook, Arjuna Arjuna was as a eunuch, and that sort of helped in what he was cursed to be a eunuch for a year, and that sort of worked out. Because in the Mahabharata, there's much cursing and much benedictions, and quite often the curses turn into benedictions and vice versa. And that. So Duryodhana then were frantically looking everywhere. Where are these numbers? If we can find them, then they can be sent back to the forest, because he knew that after their exile they hadn't found them, then they would be wanting their kingdom, which they were legally entitled to. They would be wanting their kingdom, so they were desperate to find them, then they'd have to go back to the forest for another 12 years. So but they couldn't find them anywhere. And Grandfather Bhishma said, wow, there's 5 of them, and you can't find them anywhere. You've got the spies all over all the kingdoms looking for them. Nobody can find them. You're looking in the wrong place. And I said, well, where should we be looking? He said, you should be looking where in the most opulent kingdom, where the fruit trees are loaded with fruit, all the grains are there, and the cows are giving abundant milk, and everything's very opulent, and there's jewels, and the people are happy, and everybody's prosperous. These are the places you should be looking, because wherever the Pandavas are, these are the symptoms that you will see where they are. Everybody's happy, everybody's prosperous, all the religious functions are being carried on, the cows are giving ample milk, like that. So they look, and they found King Draupadi's kingdom just sounds exactly like the place. But that year is coming quickly to an end. So they found them, but it's debatable. This is the last day of their exile. So Arjuna ends up fighting with them because they come out then the last day of their exile. They come out and the Pandavas, and Arjuna fights with them and defeats them all. And then King Draupadi realises, oh, you're the Pandavas. Nobody even realised that they were the Pandavas. The last year, you're the Pandavas. Great personalities. And was it King Draupadi's kingdom? Because Draupadi is their wife. So while they were in exile, part of their exile, that was before their exile. But Draupadi is their queen. So they go back and they go, well, we want our kingdom now. We've done 12 years in exile, and we want what's rightfully ours. We want our kingdom. Duryodhana said, I wouldn't even give you as much land as you could push a pin into. This was his reply. You get nothing. So that means, okay, there's going to be war. It's going to be this big war. So Arjuna goes to Krishna, and at the same time Duryodhana goes to Krishna. And Krishna's early in the morning, and Krishna's just waking up from bed, and Arjuna goes to his feet, standing at his feet. Duryodhana's standing at his head, and he goes. And Krishna wakes up and looks at Duryodhana and says, okay, what can I do for you, sort of thing. And so Duryodhana says, I hear you're not going to be fighting in this battle. Krishna says, no, I won't be fighting in this battle. I won't be fighting on either side in this battle. But I have an army of 1 million men, and they can fight. And Duryodhana says, well, can I have your army? And Krishna said, yes, you can. Is that right with you, Arjuna? And Arjuna said, yes, but I want you to be my chariot rider. And Krishna said, well, you want to be your chariot rider? And Duryodhana can have my army. And of course Duryodhana very happy. And he goes off, and Krishna says to Arjuna, you're very foolish. Why didn't you take the army? Why did you take my army? And Arjuna says, there's no problem with the fighting, I can do that, but I want you to be my chariot rider. Don't care about the army, I want you to be my chariot rider. And it was perfect, and Krishna was very happy with that arrangement. So their relationship has been one of very close friends. Now, Krishna is starting to give them instruction, because just a few verses before, Arjuna says to Krishna, now I'm confused about my duty and have lost all composure due to weakness. In this condition I'm asking you to please tell me clearly what is best for me. I am your disciple and the soul surrendered unto you. So, now that Arjuna has become Krishna's disciple, Krishna becomes like Jagat Guru, and he starts giving these instructions to Arjuna. And we have to remember this is also for our benefit as well. all of these instructions here are very, very beneficial for everybody. So from that point on, and then Arjuna says, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to destroy it, even if I win an unrivaled kingdom on earth and sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. And Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna chastised her enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. So Sanjaya is like one of the king's advisors, King Dhritarashtra's advisors. And he's also a great devotee of Lord Krishna and a disciple of Vasudeva. And by the mercy of Sri Vasudeva, he was given the power to see what was happening on the battlefield, even though he's in the palace with the king. He could see what was happening on the battlefield. He was given that mystic power. So right at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Dhritarashtra says, Sanjaya, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do when they arrived at the holy place of Kurukshetra? And then Dhritarashtra starts to relate what's happening on the battlefield, how Duryodhana went to Dronacharya and described all the different aspects of the army. So this is all happening, and Sanjaya is telling the blind king Dhritarashtra what's happening on the battlefield. A descendant of Bharat, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna, and that's where we're up to, where he says, the blessed Lord said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. And there's many slokas, many verses in this chapter 2 that give us the idea that we're not the body, we're the soul. We're a soul. Where Prabhupada says in this purport, the body is more important than that the body is not as important as the soul. Because the body is temporary. The body comes and goes. But the soul is eternal. And the soul is actually who we really are. So this material world that we live in, is by nature made up of perplexities, of difficulties, of like that. It's not. Nothing is perfect in this world. We think it is. Things can go wrong. So Prabhupada mentions in one purport where he said, when one realizes that this world is nothing but a source of perplexity at every moment, at every step, then it behooves one to search out a bona fide spiritual master and to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And that's in this purport of that's in this purport where Arjuna is surrendering unto Krishna. I'll just read a little bit of this purport. It's very nice. Now this is the purport to the verse is, now I'm confused about my duty and have lost all composure due to weakness. In this condition I'm asking you to tell me clearly what is best for me. Now I'm your disciple and the soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. In the commentary, Srila Prabhupada says, by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a sense of perplexities for everyone. In every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic script literature advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master and get free from the perplexities of life, which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. Similarly, the world situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, and yet it takes place, and we become perplexed. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master who is in disciplic succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. One should not, therefore, remain in material perplexities, but should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. Who is the man of material perplexities? It is he who does not understand the problems of life. In Jagya Upanishad, the perplexed man is described as follows. He is a miserly man who does not solve the problems of life as a human, and who thus quits this world like the cats and the dogs, without understanding the science of self-realization. This human form of life is the most valuable asset for the living entity who can utilize it in solving the problems of life. Therefore, one who does not utilize this opportunity properly is a miser. On the other hand, there is the Brahmins, or he who is intelligent enough to utilize his body to solve the problems of life. The Kripanas, or miserly persons, waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc. In the material conception of life, one is often attached to family life, namely to wife, children, and other members, on the basis of skin disease. The Kripana thinks that he is able to protect his family members from death, or the Kripana thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death. Such family attachment can be found even in the lower animals who take care of children also. Being intelligent, Arjuna could understand that his affection for family members and his wish to protect them from death were the causes of his perplexities. Although he could understand that his duty to fight was awaiting him, still, on account of miserly weakness, he could not discharge the duties. It is therefore asking Lord Krishna, the Supreme Spiritual Master, to make a definite solution. He offers himself to Krishna as a disciple. He wants to stop friendly talks. Talks between the Master and disciple are serious. Now Arjuna wants to talk very seriously before the recognized spiritual master. Krishna is therefore the original spiritual master of the science of Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna is the first disciple for understanding the Gita. How Arjuna understands the Bhagavad Gita is stated in Bhagavad Gita itself, and yet foolish mundane scholars explain that one need not submit to Krishna as a person, but to the unborn within Krishna. There is no difference between Krishna within and Krishna without, and one who has no sense of this understanding is the greatest fool in trying to understand the Bhagavad Gita. So, there's many verses in there. There's one, the Samsi Janani Utaviyaya and the Vani Nagrati Nirokarani, Yata Sarvani Vimaya Janani, and Yani Samyati Navani Dehi. As a person adopts new garments, discarding those that are old and born. Similarly, the soul continues to adopt new bodies, leaving those that are old and useless. And Namrita Navjaita Nakadachinna Yamava Vita Vana Vava, Ajonitya Sheshkata Yamparana, Nahanyata Namani Sariwe. The soul is never born nor dies, never been nor will be created. Because it is unborn and eternal, it is ever youthful yet ancient. It is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. And there's so many verses like this in the Bhagavad Gita pointing to the fact that we're not this body. But because we're conditioned, especially in the Western world, we're conditioned to bodily comforts, everything to do with the body. The mundane, you might say we're hardwired to the mundane. Yeah? And so this conditioning that we're involved in, all of our life has been conditioned since the time we appeared in this world as a baby. Then the conditioning begins, and he goes, but and we get entangled in all the perplexities of life that Prabhupada is talking about. All these perplexities, they come and go. Nobody wants these problems in life, but they come. So the material world is made like that. So, where would we be without problems? That saying, to be a problem solver, we're always trying to solve problems because there's always problems. This is the material world for you in a nutshell. Is a place where there are problems from the beginning of life to the end of life. But with some, you might say happiness, they call it happiness in the material world. Some people say, well, this happiness in the material world is just, the absence of suffering. Sometimes we're not suffering. We suffer sometimes. Sometimes we're not suffering. So we take that as happiness. But real happiness is with the soul. Happiness is in the soul. And bodily happiness is based on bodily comforts and bodily achievements and whatever's still the body. So it must be temporary because the body is temporary. So this happiness must be temporary. It can't be eternal. So we're taking one temporary body after another for samsara, the cycle of birth and death. So birth, old age, disease and death. And then again, whether it be in a human body or another body, there's 8,400,000 species of life, and only 400,000 of them are human species. So there's 8 million species, and we've been there for all of them. So it can take a long time and a lot of good fortune to obtain a human form of life. And it is only in this human form of life where one can approach a bona fide spiritual master, can inquire about spiritual life, can ask who I am, why am I here, why am I suffering, how to get out of this suffering. So these were actually the questions that a personality called Sanatana Goswami asked to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only 500 years ago. Mahaprabhu is Radha and Krishna combined. Now he is Krishna appearing, but he's even more than Krishna because he is Radharani and Krishna combined. Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya, Radha Krishna, Mahitanya. There's no difference between Radha and Krishna and Mahaprabhu. But Mahaprabhu is also known as a Bhakta avatar. So he descends as a Bhakta, as a devotee of Krishna. So you can say it's a devotee of himself to teach love for himself, to teach love for Krishna. But there's no difference. They're both the same. So this is why he appears to teach us how to come out of this conditioning, this entanglement that we've got ourselves into. So he comes to teach that, and he teaches by example, by his behaviour, how to become a devotee of Lord Krishna. And one thing he says is, the more he says, Chaito Darpan Marjanam, that this heart, this consciousness is within the heart area, with the Jiva soul, where we are, the Jivatma, known as Jivatma, and the Super soul is also the Paramatma, and within the heart there. So consciousness is all spread all over the body, this individual consciousness is spread all over the body, but it's emanating from the heart. So he's saying, Chaito Darpa the Marjanam, to cleanse the mirror of the heart, because the heart is dusty, is dirty, all this conditioning in the material world, layer after layer after layer of conditioning, and it needs to be cleaned off. So we think about Krishna, talk about Krishna, read about Krishna, hear about Krishna, do everything for Krishna, and that will help to purify us. The purification of the heart comes by the holy name of Krishna and doing all sorts of things for Krishna. and not quite the best for this is Lord Chaitanya. He's come 500 years ago, and his whole pastimes are recorded in a book called Chaitanya Charitamrita. And in that book, Sanatana Goswami is asking, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I suffering? How to get out of the suffering? What is the goal of life? And how to obtain that? So there's 5 questions basically he's asking. And Lord Chaitanya, it's called Sanatana Shiksha, and Lord Chaitanya says, Krishna Polisi Jivanadi Bhai Dihasandara Samsara Duk. Forgetting Krishna, the living entity, has been attracted by the external features since time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy, Maya, gives him all sorts of leverage in his material existence. And that's what's happening to us. But he also says, Givera Swarupa Krishna Nityadas Krishna Tatashi Shakti Veda Veda Vikash. That the living entity is an eternal Nitya Krishna Das, is an eternal servant of Lord Krishna. And when we come to realise this, what our real position is, this is what Mahaprabhu is, Lord Chaitanya is saying to Sanatana Goswami. This is your real position of the Jiva soul. But you've forgotten Krishna. You come to this world, but really, you're Krishna's eternal servant. So you need to somehow or other come back to Krishna, make our way back to Krishna. So this is Lord Chaitanya's whole Leela is teaching how to come back to Krishna. And you've got that Shikshastakam where that Chaitanya Marjana comes from. And he says there, in that, Vinada Pishanishana, Lord Pishanishana, be humble, be tolerant, to be respectful to everybody, not to expect any respect for ourselves, like that. And in that way, one will be able to chant the holy name of Lord Krishna purely, and that is the secret to our existence, or getting out of this material world, is to purely chant the holy name of Lord Krishna. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in his small tattva that pure devotion is the way, love for Hari is the goal. These are the last two of that small tattva. I'm not going to speak for too much longer, but that's the idea. To think about Krishna, read about Krishna, talk about Krishna, offer everything to Krishna, sacrifice ourselves somewhat, we can just sacrifice a bit here and there, or as much as we can. For Krishna, Lord, we greatly benefited. And anybody that hears this brother of the future will greatly benefited. I'm just going to tell a quick story about Lord Jagannath. So we've got Lord Jagannath there, and Lord Jagannath is very famous in Orissa. And Jagannath Guru, very famous with Jagannath Prasad, and they're sought after all over the world. He's known good. Jagannath Prasad is famous. Everyone knows. There's 700 cooks in the biggest kitchen in the world, and they're cooking all day for the Jagannath. But they offer 52 offerings a day to Lord Jagannath. Anyway, there's one story that Vaikantas Maharaj told. He's a Rissan scholar, a God brother of Srila Prabhupada and disciple of Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was an amazing personality. And he told this story and said, it's happened in recent times because although the Mohammedans pretty well, they went to India and they pretty well took over, especially Bengal and Bihar and around there, they were governing that, but they never really got a foothold in Orissa because King Patapuruja was a powerful king, and he kept them at bay with the help of Lord Jagannath. They never really got a foothold there. But they did attack Orissa now and again. So a few hundred years ago, 100 years ago, they attacked Orissa and they managed to kidnap the princess, one of the princesses. They managed to kidnap her for the pleasure of the general. And then when they left, they'd done what they'd come to do, they left. And she was left on the outskirts of Puri, and she was pregnant. So that issue came out in that way, and that boy that was born of her, he was a great devotee of Lord Jagannath. But because of his situation, he was an outcast, basically. So he couldn't go to the temple. He couldn't, so it's on the outskirts of Puri, but you could see the chakra on the top of the temple. And Mahaprabhu had said to Rupa and Sanatana, that is non-different than Lord Jagannath, because they couldn't go, and they didn't feel that they could go in the temple because of their previous association. So that boy, so Mahaprabhu told me, no obeisances to the chakra is the same as the temple. That boy, he would cook khichdi every day. Khichdi was never allowed to be offered to Lord Jagannath. It was considered low class. So khichdi was never offered to Lord Jagannath. And this boy, he would cook khichdi every day, and he would offer it to Lord Jagannath from afar, the chakra. And Lord Jagannath was attracted by the devotion of that boy. He was a great devotee. And so he would go and he would take that khichdi. Personally take that khichdi. And one day, the Pujari came and said, what's that on Jagannath's mouth? What's this now? Khichdi. How can be khichdi on his mouth? No, that's not even, we don't even offer khichdi, it's illegal. So then a whole big thing happened. The government got involved, the police got involved, everybody got involved. How has this happened? They couldn't figure it out. So they went to the head Pujari and said, you're in charge, so it's your fault, you have to take the responsibility for it, and they threw him in jail. And the guy said, I don't know what happened, Jagannath was, and then Jagannath appeared in a dream to the magistrate and said, this is what happened, don't disturb that man, let him out of jail, don't disturb him. This is what happened, there's a great devotee of mine who lives on the outskirts of town, and he offers me khichdi every day, and I go every day, but this time I happen to be a bit late getting back and didn't come and place properly, and the rest is history, that khichdi and not being caught. And so they said, oh, good enough, so I think they offer khichdi for them. But there's so many stories about Lord Jagannath by Dave Subhadra, and even if we can't go into the temple, they come out once a year. So the Rathiatra goes from the Lord Jagannath temple up the main road to the Gundisha temple, which is quite a way, it takes all day. And because the Rath carts always stop on the way because of the pastime of Lord Jagannath. Stop here and there. I'm probably going to leave it there because I thank you very much. Well, if anybody's got any quick questions, we could answer.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Two questions. One is, he said that, first of all, why would the Pandavas have accepted a 12-year exile? If our Kshatriyas...
Well, that's what Bhima said. Bhima said that. Bhima, no, it was fighting because it was a gambling match. Kshatriyas gamble. Yudhisthira was a hopeless gambler. But he was challenged by Sakuni and then Rashtra or maybe Dushashan. He was challenged to gamble and gambled away the whole kingdom, even gambled away his brothers, even gambled away Draupadi, gambled everything away. Because Sakuni was expert dice player and probably knew how to. So they gambled everything away, and Bhima was so angry and so disturbed. I'll fight them all. Smoke was coming out of his ears, sparks were coming out of his eyes. This is how angry he was. And so, because of the Kshatriya code, they had this big Kshatriya code. The Kshatriya there's many things that they have to pretty well do everything they are requested to do. And gambling is one of them, but there's many other things too, which in the Mahabharata, that's described. So yeah, they were forced in that way. to do that. And the problem was, why Krishna was so angry, even with Vishnu Dev, and they didn't say anything when this was all going on, and Draupadi was dragged in there, and she was on a single cloth, she was dragged in there, they tried to expose her, make her naked, and that's when Krishna supplied all the cloth to her, because she's going, oh Krishna help me, holding onto a cloth, help me Krishna, like trying to protect herself, help me, and Krishna's not protecting, and she finally went, Krishna please, and Draupadi is Krishna's dear friend, and once when he cut his finger, for taking some fruit or something, cut his finger, and Draupadi got her cloth, which she was wearing, so he went, bandaged up, and that was sort of part of Krishna made a promise, being that whatever, he was so fond of Draupadi, and when she surrendered, Krishna supplied unlimited cloth, and that pulling a cloth of Draupadi in just piles of cloth on, they couldn't get to the end of it. But yeah, that was pretty hidden, and Srila Maharaj actually said, this is the highest point of the Mahabharata. Draupadi's surrender like that is the highest point of the whole Mahabharata. That's what he considered to be the highest point.
My question was related to the verse that one that laments either for the living or the dead. But I mean, if someone didn't lament for a family member that passed away, it would be quite socially unacceptable. You think there was something wrong with them, like if your mother passed away and you just like...
Even Mahaprabhu lamented when Haridas Thakur lived.
Yeah.
He said, but at the end of that, after all that happened that day, Mahaprabhu retired to a room with mixed feelings of happiness and unhappiness. Happiness that Haridas Thakur had gone back to the spiritual world, and unhappiness that now he wanted to have a situation.
Right.
Mahaprabhu loved Haridas Thakur, and Haridas Thakur couldn't go to the Jagannath temple because of his situation, couldn't go in and see Lord Jagannath and wouldn't because of his situation, consider himself fit to go in the temple. Jagannath and Mahaprabhu are non-different, and Mahaprabhu every day went to see Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur couldn't go and see Jagannath, but Jagannath in the form of Mahaprabhu went to see him every day. Yeah, and when Abhimanyu was killed, if you read in the Mahabharata, that is heart-breaking, heart-rendering, the grief that even Krishna was affected by Abhimanyu. He was a 16-year-old boy, he was brilliant. Maharaj Parikshit's father, what was his mother's name again? Yeah. I can't remember. Yeah. But she was Abhimanyu's wife's name. I'm sorry. Yeah, Abhimanyu's wife's name. That's Parikshit's parents, Abhimanyu and whatever her name is. When that happened, but personally, we have to see above that. I mean, that's there, and we're lamenting for so many things. When our friends leave, and I've seen so many of my friends leave the world and that. And you can't, you wouldn't be normal, like you say, if you didn't lament, you didn't feel something. Some things with people that...
How do we understand that verse then?
Well, that verse Prabhupada describes in the book that the body is not as important as the soul. We have to some people maybe don't. Some devotees probably take it literally like that. But there is definitely room for lamentation amongst devotees, amongst friends, amongst people. This world is a place of lamentation. People are lamenting about all sorts of things. But we have to try to put things into perspective. We have to try to understand. Okay, well, my friends left, but it's for their good, especially of the devotees, the people that are moving on in their journey, yeah. Non-devotees, people that don't know the Bhagavad Gita and don't know anything about this, they don't understand. Like I heard a girl say the other day, because she'd seen some psychic program on TV, she said, I'm so glad to hear that when we die, we're going to be with our relatives. Yeah. Because that's what the psychic will see, you know, that your mother. And it's possible because in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says if you worship the forefathers, you go to the forefathers, worship the ghosts and the, well, you go to them, worship me and you come to me. You know, it's depending on our consciousness, how we view things, how we understand things. And if we can understand things through the eyes of the scripture, if we can see through scripture, then that's perfect seeing. That's perfect seeing. And when Krishna says, you're lamenting for that which is not worthy of lamentation, the wise lament, neither for the living nor the dead, we can see that, yes, this is what the scripture is saying. This is how lamentation can be, then it can be extreme, but it can be, you know, between us, just within ourselves, within a few people, you know, who are missing the same friend or missing the same relative or whatever. There's going to be lamentation, you know. But the ultimate verse in this book is chapter 66, you know, surrender unto me alone, I will save you from all problems in this world. Don't fear, you know, I'll get rid of all your sins, I'll get rid of all your lamentation. So depending on how we are surrendered to Krishna, we'll see things differently. Our surrender, as we surrender more and more, we will see things more in a spiritual way, and we won't be so affected by our material, by our attachments, whether they be material or even spiritual attachments. But Srila Prabhupada lamented for his disciples when they lived, the disciples that died before him.
He definitely lamented for his guru.
Sorry?
Definitely lamented for his guru also.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's another thing. I mean, when Guru Dev left the world, I was in India when he left, and it was like Namadweep was like, you know, a land of broken hearts. There was so much tears and so on. When Guru Dev left, and that's the way it should be. You know? That's the way it should be for Guru and for devotees. But, you know, because a couple of weeks ago, Sridhar Maharaj left. I was very good friends with him. I hadn't seen him for years and years, but I couldn't help feeling him. And we were missing on our times together, and he was about my age too, and so many devotees have left, and we miss them. But we can also learn from all that. We can strengthen our devotion, strengthen our faith in our Guru and in Krishna and in the devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Certainly now.